Thank you, Your Honor.
My next chapter. Just kidding.
We have a very special presentation this morning. One of our state land board presentations, we held off doing that today as we discuss the Elliott. As you know, this is a partnership award for the Elliott State Research Forest Advisory Committee, and there's several members here today. So Governor, I'll turn it over to you for the remarks and we'll get underway.
Thank you, Director Walker, and good morning, everyone. And I'm just delighted to see so many folks here this morning to be here for the presentation of the Land Board Partnership Award to the Elliott State Forest Advisory Committee. We did recognize other state land board award honorees in October, but it really seemed appropriate for us to honor the committee here today when we have a land board meeting agenda that reflects the Elliott State Research Forest truly coming to life. Asha, Colin, Melissa, Tom, Jeff, Mike, Michael, Ken, Mary, Bob, Mark, Keith, and Bob, and Peter, I think. Thank you all very much for your extraordinary work. What I loved about this project is that you all came together and collaborated respectfully for years across very diverse interests to help realize the land board's vision for the Elliott Forest, a public forest that has fulfilled its contribution to Oregon schools and will continue to contribute to conservation, recreation, education, and local economies as a research forest. In April of this year, I was really proud to sign Senate Bill 1546, establishing the Elliott State Research Forest. I noted at the time this solution wouldn't have been possible in every state, that the love and the care we have for Oregon's natural wonders was so very clear in each and every stakeholder's action. You certainly got it done the Oregon way, putting aside your individual interests and coming together for the collective good. Remarkable, excuse me, I'm tearing up. Remarkable work for our state demands remarkable recognition. And I am therefore delighted this morning to introduce our Oregon Poet Laureate, Anis Mozgani, and he is joining us today via Zoom because of his other schedule to perform poems in celebration of the Elliott Advisory Committee. I had the honor of appointing him as Oregon's 10th Poet Laureate. He had to serve during the pandemic, and as we were, it's a 2-year time frame, and as we were determining what to do next, I thought it was appropriate that he serve another 2 years, which will enable him to get out throughout Oregon during that time. So we're very, very pleased he can join us today. Our Poet Laureate program is a collaborative project of the state's 5 cultural partners, the Oregon Arts Commission, Oregon Humanities, Oregon Heritage Commission, and the Oregon Historical Society, and the State Historic Preservation Office, with funding from the Oregon Cultural Trust. This is my plug. If you haven't made your donations through the Oregon Cultural Trust yet, please do so before the end of the year. It's a really great opportunity to leverage your tax dollars. Anis, it is wonderful to see you this morning and to have the pleasure of hearing your poetry as part of the final celebration of this incredible and amazing group. Performing The Branch is both branch and tree. I give you Anis Mozgani.
Thank you, Governor Brown. How funny what a strange world we live in to have this get to be the first time that we get to have an event to share some sort of space with. So I'm very grateful for that, and just grateful to get to sharing this morning with all of you. Excuse me. The branches both branch and the tree. Over Mosier in a meadow, wild flowering at my summer's start, 1,700 feet above the Columbia River, amongst the lupin and yellow balsam root, I saw a crow snatch a squirrel out of a burrow and the white tail of a deer bounding away. Hidden amongst the thin branched bendings, I was shown where the doe had made their bedding in the softer grass. From Rowena Crest, I watched the Columbia River Highway curve back from where we had come, snaking through the years and years and years of trees, rock, and water, laid down so any and all could come from where they were, to be under the canopy of the woods and hear the water fall from peaks to the rivers below on their way to the ocean. On the beach of Neskowin, the waves and sand give way to Sitka trunks that were of before, as if spirits made scene at low tide. I couldn't get to these ghosts as the high water had come in, but saw in Detroit the stumps of what was sitting in the low marsh. 10 miles or so east of the lake there, I watched trees outside my window pass, and am reminded of the wildfires of the year before, how across our state the flames ate the land as history often does, taking what was until gone, and then often, in the only way we seem to know how, going over it. Every leaf goes and returns in the body of another. You and this world will go and return in the body of another body. Thinking of what is gone and what still is green, my heart does not quite know what to do with itself. Perhaps you too know this feeling. If not, I want for you to walk in trees, held by the earth in the same hand as the land. How time becomes something different in this holding. The length of ourself becoming both shorter and longer, the way a branch is both branch and tree, how the tree in the forest is both tree and forest, how me in the forest is forest, and the forest in me. Everything a something holds is a part of the something. The lupin and the prairie star are buds and blossoms, and also meadow, as two crow and doe and I. Mountain fall, river flow, the mouth of the ocean, all connecting the what was to what will be. Above me on the road I'm on, which hugs the Santiam River, the water that lives somewhere higher up than here has cracked open its icy coat, unbuttoned by spring, not yet upon us, but on its way. I watch the water tumbling down, bathing the moss of the rocks, on the water's way to the river that speaks outside the right side of my car's window. The road under me curves. The river below me bends. The trees above and around, whether gone or still giving, drape the state, blanketing us not only by their boughs, but also that of us that were before. To hold them is to also hold ourselves. A blanket for all, woven and darned by many before us, darned and rethreaded by those yet to come. I want for you this blanket, these trees flanking us, threading their way up and down the mountainside, holding us even as we hold them too, some bare and blackened with soot, others heavy with leaves, or becoming such, decorating the stitch of the land. The branches, both burnt and green, rise around us on the road we took to get here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated that. And I heard you also were able to share one of your poems yesterday at the Oregon Business Summit. So thank you so much for joining us today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Treasurer Reed.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Mr. Mosgani. I will never tire of celebrating what we are doing in the Elliott State Forest. After all, we are creating a research forest that is providing a better understanding of how we balance our concerns for working forest management, for climate and rural communities. We are improving our ability to protect threatened and endangered species. We kept the Elliott in public hands with access for recreation. This was no easy task, and we shouldn't skip past that fact. There were a lot of moments, I think, over the years when I at least doubted whether we were going to be able to pull this off. I want to thank all of you, particularly Oregon State University, who didn't walk out of my office when I first asked them if they wanted to take on a forest in addition to some new buildings. I've had the good fortune of working with a number of inspired and visionary leaders at Oregon State University, including former President Ed Ray, now 3 deans of forestry, from the late Thomas Mannis to Anthony Davis to now Tom DeLuca, Provost Ed Fazer, Paul Odenthal, lots of people who have added their own perspectives and skills to this really adventurous process. And to all of the team members who have been part of this adventure, thank you for all of your contributions. You've done what is in the very best tradition of Oregon, setting aside your own organizational and ideological priorities to come together around a shared vision for what we're going to do as Oregonians. And many of you, thank you, have signed up for additional service to the state. So we will continue to be grateful for that. I don't think it's any stretch to say that there are people we don't know who will not know any of our names, but will nonetheless benefit from the work that each of you have done. And that's, I think, the mark of true service. I'm reminded of something that Winston Churchill reportedly said once, that this isn't the end. It isn't even the beginning of the end, but it might be the end of the beginning. We've all got a lot more work to do, but it is appropriate, I think, to recognize another milestone in a really significant process. So my thanks go with all of you and with my colleagues on the land board. And now, since we haven't yet heard sufficient poetry, there's probably not ever enough poetry in the world. We have another poem from our poet laureate, Mr. Mosgani. It's back to you, please.
Thank you, Treasurer Reed. This is a poem called Gratitude that I wrote back in the first year of the pandemic. Thankful for the bend without the break, the branch beneath the weight of the finch, light-boned they be, the shake of a fir to alight a sky for the earth, still having not released us from their embrace, their rivers, that peak, those stars, on clear nights swimming through both. Thankful for the crows consistent in their caw, as if saying, wake, the morning lies in the street, wanting of me to be rebronzed with its kiss, that every day in my city, in this place, the people strengthen together for something unseen and powerful, that somewhere in the distance, the ocean swells like an answer lifting towards a grace only taking shape when spoken aloud for somebody else, white-capped, green deep, coming back to that which had tossed it, and full of song from where it had been thrown. Thank you all. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Mosgani. Did you all catch the first line of that poem? Thankful for the bend without the break. There could not be a more apt line for the Elliott State Research Forest Advisory Committee's work together than the bend, and more bend without the break. You endured to a wonderful outcome through bending and bending, like Governor Kate Brown, yoga level bending and bending and bending, but never breaking. And Oregon is stronger for your work. So it is my honor to present with gratitude the State Land Board's Partnership Award to the Elliott State Research Forest Advisory Committee. Y'all come back. I don't know. Well, then somebody tell us. Yeah, exactly. Sign seating. Okay. Relax. Many. Thank you all. Congratulations. Oh, last night. All right. Thanks, everybody, for being here, so we could take this opportunity to celebrate. I am just so pleased that our poet laureate could join us this morning. Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
It is, of course, odd that we are meeting through, it's not Zoom, is it Microsoft Teams? This is Zoom. Okay, hopefully nobody from Microsoft is here. Anyway, I'm just so glad you could join us, and I hope the rest of your day is enjoyable as this morning, but we're really glad you could join us. Thank you, and keep writing. It will make our hearts sing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
I think this actually concludes our land board ceremony. So we are headed on to the state land board meeting. You are all welcome to join us and stay for the meeting. We would love to have the support, the kudos, and the encouragement. It feels a little different. I've got some new security detail, and I think we've been telling them that today's Department of State Lands board meeting is very different than meetings in the past, and it's because of your hard work, your efforts that we're here today in such a celebratory manner. So thank you all very much. Now a word from our sponsor. And with that, I will open the meeting of the State Land Board on December 13th, 2022. Thank you so much. Director Walker, take it away.
Thank you, Governor. I have to return to some more mundane and routine items, but it was an enjoyable event this morning. Thank you. Our first agenda item is the consent item to approve the minutes of the October 11, 2022 State Land Board meeting.
Do I have a motion?
I'm sure I move approval of the minutes from October 11th, 2022.
Treasurer Reed moves the approval of the minutes from the October 11th, 2022 meeting. Secretary Fagan.
Second, Madam
She
Chair.
seconds, hearing and seeing no objection, so approved. Next.
Thank you, Governor. We'll move to agenda item 2. Well, we're going to move to the Elliott State Research Forest items. And we won't quite move to 2 yet. I'll provide some remarks and then we'll go forward from there. Excuse me, as we all noted, this is an historic day for the Elliott State Forest. One I know the governor and treasurer have worked very hard toward and look forward to for years. And I know Secretary Fagan was delighted when she became a part of the board and could help see this come to fruition. Before your consideration this morning are key steps toward the Elliott becoming a research forest. Governor, though the transition won't be complete today, your charge back in 2018 to divest the forest from the Common School Fund and manage it into the future as a publicly owned forest, supporting multiple values, will be accomplished today. Treasurer Reed, today we will take significant steps to realize your concept of an actively managed forest dedicated to scientific research that will benefit public and private forest lands into the future. And while you are newest to this journey, Secretary Fagan, your focus on transparency and extensive engagement is embedded in both the work leading up to today's decisions and in the process that will complete this transition in the coming months of 2023. Excuse me. Our agenda today, in a moment. I caught a cold from my grandchildren a month ago, and I still have a little bit of the scratchiness, but I'm not contagious. Our agenda today starts with public testimony on the Elliott-related agenda items. This will be followed by a progress report on a forest management plan for the proposed research forest. Land board approval of a completed plan by July 1, 2023 is one of the prerequisites to establishing the new state agency contemplated by Senate Bill 1546. Dean Tom DeLuca and project manager Shannon Murray from the Oregon State University College of Forestry will present first. They will be followed by a panel of Elliott State Research Forest Advisory Committee members, who we are so grateful for. And we have invited them to provide perspective on the forest management plan and anything else related to the ongoing work that they wish to highlight and address to you today. We won't be asking for any specific action or decision related to the forest management plan today because it's not complete, but everyone involved is ready to answer your questions and incorporate your direction into the work product that will be brought back for the land board review and approval in the spring. Let me say that while the forest management plan is not complete, it is at the state on the stage that we had asked Oregon State University College of Forestry to prepare it for. So we are on task, on time. After the forest management plan discussion, I'll then walk you through the agenda items, asking for board action to decouple the forest from the Common School Fund and to fulfill the Senate Bill 1546 requirement to formally designate the lands that will constitute the new Elliott State Research Forest effective January 1, 2024. And I got goosebumps. I always get goosebumps when really important things are about to happen. As exciting as it is to finally be acting to put these two cornerstones in place, the agenda items aren't particularly elaborate. Legal counsel and I will simply be ready to answer your questions as you prepare to vote on the two decision points framed in the staff reports. Our final agenda item of the day will be the prospective appointment of a 9-member board of directors charged with overseeing management and operation of the Elliott State Research Forest, starting on the January 1, 2024 effective date of Senate Bill 1546. Making these appointments now will help facilitate these individuals acting as informal advisors to you and the department as work is completed next year leading up to the establishment of the forest in January 2024. And I'll let you know a letter will be going out to the board tomorrow or Thursday, indicating that I'm going to be appointing Jeff Huntington on our staff to be the quote, executive director to the board. We can't formally appoint an executive director, and that's a task that the board will undertake when they become permanent. But for now, he will serve in that capacity from the department to help them stand up as a state agency and do all the preparations that are necessary for that, and our continued work and collaboration with Oregon State University. So if you don't have any questions for me, we can begin the public testimony. We have set aside an hour. I don't think that we'll need that. We've only had 7 folks sign up. But I believe the 7 individuals who have signed up are providing testimony by Zoom, and your tremendous land board assistant has the sign up list. And I will mention that we also have 62 written submissions that were provided to you, members of the advisory committee, and they are also posted on our website. So at this time, I'll step back and let you take over the meeting.
Thank you, Director Walker. Any questions from Bland Board members? Doesn't look like it. We're just going to go ahead and dive into public testimony. And the first witness, I believe, is Josh Laughlin. Thanks so much for joining us today. And it's good to see you, even if it's via Zoom.
Good morning. Can you hear me all okay?
We can hear you.
Great. Well, good morning, Governor Brown, Treasurer Reed, and Secretary of State Fagan. My name is Josh Laughlin, Executive Director of Eugene-based Cascadia Wildlands, testifying on behalf of our 12,000 members and supporters. I appreciate the Land Board's leadership to retire the archaic policy that linked K through 12 school funding in Oregon with old growth logging on the Elliott, and also the board's ability to find a solution that supports our school kids and keeps this remarkable forest in public ownership. As we near the end of this process, I want to draw your attention to a few areas of concern. I believe it's critical that Oregon leaders get this right, as the final product will govern this outstanding public forest for the next 80 years. One, the process to identify the first Elliott Board of Directors over the last few weeks was rushed, isn't balanced, and is deficient in forest carbon expertise. Please ensure this discipline is well represented on the inaugural board, as the temperate rainforests found on the Elliott will act as a laboratory for cutting-edge climate research. Two, apparently a few dozen property owners who live on Loon Lake, which is immediately adjacent to the Elliott State Forest, haven't been contacted about this plan. As good neighbors, it's critical that Oregon State University engages this important stakeholder on how proposed forest research and management in Solander and Little Solander watersheds in particular may impact their property values, viewsheds, drinking water, access, stream flows, and other values. Three, we were glad to see the 788-acre East Hackey Ridge parcel in the northwest corner of the Elliott was part of the appraisal and decoupled from the Common School Fund due to its location, old growth forest habitat, and legal history. This parcel must be included as part of the large block conservation research watershed on the forest's west side. And four, it's important Oregon State University circulates for public review an updated financial plan for the research forest in a timely fashion so Oregonians have a firm understanding of the economics of this proposal before it's ultimately blessed by its own board of directors and the land board. We continue to iron out wrinkles in the ongoing habitat conservation plan process with Department of State Lands and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and will continue to provide substantive input to Oregon State University with its draft forest management plan to make sure durable conservation measures for the forest and its species are baked into these foundational documents. There's a lot of critical work still to be done as the July 2023 completion deadline looms. Thank you for your time today as this proposal continues to be considered.
Thank you, Josh. Questions from board members? Not seeing any. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Next up, we have Barb Chamet. She's not on. Okay. Catherine Stone. Nope. Craig Patterson.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Governor Brown, Secretary Fagan, Treasurer Reed, and Director Walker. First, I would like to say that not all public testimony is equal. When I hear Dr. Jerry Franklin, Professor Emeritus at the University of Washington, state without reservation in the meeting December 2020 that the proposal that Dean DeLuca and his staff have developed is not a research proposal, but rather a management logging proposal. First, let me share some perspectives on the history of logging. My grandfather worked in the industry all his life. I worked with him the summer of '67 before college in a small resaw mill in Redding, California. Jobs were everywhere then, and $2.89 an hour, a man's wage, was enough to support a family and have a boat on Lake Shasta. How times have changed. While the timber logging industry supported my grandfather all his life, it doesn't support us today. Industrial forestry represents a short boom followed by a protracted bust every time. No exceptions. Consider that in the 70s and 80s, wood products accounted for over 70% of the employment in Lane County. Today, it's 3 to 5%. Consider that Lane County and Douglas County cut more timber between 1950 and 1990 than 48 states. Consider that there are no thriving rural forested communities anywhere, according to Mary Mitsos, the CEO of the National Forest Foundation. Consider that between 1990 and 92, the Pacific Northwest lost 40,000 primary family wage scale jobs when 364 mills closed. Those jobs have never come back, all the result of industrial logging. I have lived in McKenzie Bridge since 1974, so I've witnessed firsthand these changes. In 1985-86, with the first lottery monies for economic development, we organized in the McKenzie Valley and developed a report, Abundant Resources, Abundant Opportunities, a grassroots attempt to define a sustainable economic foundation based on balance between forestry, agriculture, tourism, and geothermal development. Many said it was ahead of its time, yet it never got any funding or support. In 2005, I gave a paper for the National Roundtable on Sustainable Forests in Washington, D.C. I sent you a link in my previous comments. The key message of that was that sustainable forestry represents the simultaneous, critical, simultaneous integration of environmental health, economic vitality, and social equality. However, once again, there was no support or follow-up. Why not make that simultaneous integration the overriding theme of the Elliott? A better goal or target would be hard to find. The H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest, that is in my backyard essentially 10 miles away, has been in existence since 1948. However, in all of the efforts I have made over the years to get scientists and researchers to address this simultaneous integration, they have refused and even discouraged my participation. Point being, there are no experts or even scientists whom I'm aware of who address this critical integration in holistic and effective ways. However, the amount of socially relevant science that informs, impacts, and helps rural contiguous communities is rare and largely ineffective. How can it be that I live in the heart of the most productive softwood forest in the world, and today there are virtually no jobs? For example, with the McKenzie School District, K through 12, today there are 175 students, when 40 years ago, there was over 1,000. No jobs, no families, no school kids. As I listened to past meetings, I heard concepts like exploring alternatives. Yet the current plan isn't about alternatives. It's about maintaining the status quo, largely, industrial forestry with questionable and minor tweaks, just as Dr. Franklin has confirmed. I find it particularly disingenuous that there is a recognition of indigenous peoples, tribes, and cultures in name alone, but not real understanding of the opposite differences of world nature views around respect and reverence for nature. Alternative research would include and adopt indigenous cultural wisdom and stop industrial logging as being totally contrary to their views and values. Furthermore, there is historical evidence how clear-cutting and industrial forestry is not sustainable after the third rotation, as the soil is spent. Dean DeLuca, a soil scientist, should know this. However, the liabilities extend before and beyond just the soil. Take, for example, the Gilchrist Forest, the newest state forest since 2010. Oregon Department of Forestry bought this for $15 million, essentially a cutover plantation. While some of the forest is approaching 30 years old, the revenue stream tells the story no one wants to hear. Over the last 5 years, the income on 72,000 acres has averaged about $52,000, while the expenses just for fire protection and road maintenance is over $300,000 a year. When I've asked what is the projected break-even point, mum is the word. A negative economic death spiral, which no one wants to acknowledge regarding industrial forestry. Will you make the same mistake on the Elliott? Habitat conservation areas are nothing more than a legal way to take from the forest and justify logging, when logging is the main cause of endangered species in the first place. When do you
Thank you. Can you wrap it up in about 30 seconds? Another half minute?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll just say that Tom Bender in Rain Magazine once said that appropriate technology reminds us that before we choose our tools and our techniques, we must first choose our dreams and our values. For some technologies serve them, while others make them uninhabitable and unobtainable. And I would just suggest that you think very strongly about what we're leaving our kids and our grandkids. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time. Next up, I have Francis Etherington.
Unmute.
Good morning.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. We can't see you.
Oh, well, I wonder why. Oh, here it is. Start video. Okay. Okay, we're there.
Oh.
Good morning.
Oh, good. I'm so glad you could be here this morning. And
Me
are you,
too.
oh, it's a virtual background. I was
Yes.
quite jealous for a moment until I realized it was a virtual. So,
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. You know, my name is Francis Etherington, and I live near the Elliott, and I have enjoyed visiting there for decades. I appreciate the work now being done to help protect some of its important places by decoupling school funding from logging mature forests. This should include adding the East Hackey watershed to the Elliott State Research Forest. East Hackey is next to the conservation research watersheds, so it's important that it becomes part of those reserves. It's on the north edge of the Elliott, an important place for endangered wildlife and also important for the elk. The public enjoys in the Dean Creek elk viewing area, as East Hackey is almost adjacent to that area. About the Elliott Board of Directors that has been proposed, I'm concerned with the rushed process to identify the members. It seems to have resulted in a board that is heavier on resource extraction reps and light on scientific expertise. A climate scientist would be an important addition. It was interesting to read in the Habitat Conservation Plan that the value of carbon on the Elliott is worth almost $1,032,000 per year. Now, since climate is the number one issue our forests need to protect, it is critical for climate scientists to be on the governing board. Another wildlife biologist would also be good. For example, look at the coastal marten. This critically endangered species was protected under the Federal Endangered Species Act over 2 years ago. Yet OSU failed to recognize this fact and only considered it a state-sensitive species in the drafts of the forest management and habitat conservation plans. Now, they did correct this in the later drafts, but still, there is no survey protocol yet written to determine if projects could harm this species. The marten has been confirmed to be present very close to the Elliott, just 12 kilometers away. So it likely also resides on the Elliott. A biologist on the board could help review a strong survey protocol to make sure its habitat is protected. I also want to point out, similar with Josh, that the neighbors to the Elliott should have been contacted and specifically invited to this public process. For instance, the families that live under the Solander Creek watersheds, they really do need to be protected from logging impacts. Now, above them is an extensive watershed, so heavy logging could impact their water quantity and quality and increase nearby fire hazards. The Elliott's governing board can help protect nearby citizens from these impacts. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Ms. Etherington. I just want to say thank you for your long time engagement and advocacy on behalf of the Elliott. So really appreciate your time and energy today.
Thank you.
Ms. Sue Craig, we have up next. Maybe.
Hello.
Hello.
All
How are
right.
you? We can see you and we can hear you.
Okay. And you can hear me, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Sue Craig, and I am here pretty much representing myself, but also the Interfaith Earthkeepers of Eugene Springfield. And thank you, Governor, and all the panel members for having us speak today. We appreciate that. I am also part of Many Rivers Sierra Club, which includes the area where the Elliott is. And I have been very, very involved in watching a lot of what's going on with the Elliott. And when you passed SB 1546, I was most concerned about the Elliott State Research Forest Authority Board and its director. I am frankly appalled at how this is being developed and who will be in charge of it, which is OSU. And it seems to me that you all have given the key to the hen house, OSU, with no oversight by any other group, and that this authority, which will come out of OSU, is heavily laden at this point with people in the timber industry. They have a lot of control over this. And as Francis was noting, there's very little that we're seeing as far as the biological, ecological aspects being addressed for the Elliott. I still feel as if you are thinking of this forest as so many board feet. And that really, really bothers me. And OSU especially seems to have this as their main concern. How many people they can pay for by every year taking out trees. And those are my trees, your trees, our trees. And I have a great granddaughter now, and I don't think she's ever going to see and get to see this world the way we have known it. So I really hope that you can kind of change direction here, and I don't know how you're going to do it because of SB 1546. But we need carbon sequestration hugely. Everybody else in the world is looking at where we can get the best carbon sequestration. And it is certainly along our coastline, especially in Oregon. Thank you for listening to us. I hope that you can really hear what we are saying to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Craig. We appreciate your willingness to present your concerns here today. Next up, we have Fergus McLean.
Good morning. I'm Fergus McLean from Dexter in Lane County. I spent my childhood summers growing up at our family cabin across the Umpqua River from the Elliott. My thanks to the Land Board for your leadership and this opportunity to comment to supplement my written comments. I think Dean Anthony Davis best described our Elliott opportunity as a landscape of questions. Questions about topics like these: principles of forest research design, qualified leaders in forest research design, questioning the financialized industrial forest paradigm, forest carbon science, forest carbon offsets, role of carbon reserves in endangered species protections, Pacific Northwest forests and the carbon cycle, interpreting and understanding the new forest inventory analysis data, principles of ecological forestry, comparing the industrial and ecological forestry paradigms, the role of forestry research in Oregon's economy, ecological forestry in Oregon's economy, the role of OSU in forest research, the quality of OSU forest stewardship, industry influence on OSU forestry, potential impacts of carbon science on Oregon's economy, the impact of global carbon markets on forestry in Oregon, the corporate role in control and suppression of forest carbon science. Can Oregon become the global leader in research on ecological forestry and carbon science? What would real science look like in the Elliott? What is the scale and depth of harms from industrial forestry? When will herbicide use receive a balanced and objective evaluation? How can ecological forestry and carbon science transform Oregon's economy, landscapes, and society? How can we develop forest practices which benefit all Oregonians? How shall we train the next generation of carbon and ecologically literate forest scientists and managers? In my 40 years of forestry work in the mountains of Lane and Douglas counties, I found no terrain more difficult to navigate than that of the Elliott. May you guide our way to the highest and best outcome for all concerned.
Thank you very much, Mr. McLean. We really appreciate your input and your feedback on this work, and just want to encourage all of the folks that testified this morning to continue to stay engaged.
Thank you.
Are there any more folks to testify? Okay, that concludes our public testimony. I'd like for a moment, Director Walker, Dean DeLuca, if you would please come forward and respond to some of the concerns that were raised. I will to Mr. Laughlin and Ms. Etherington and Ms. Craig about the rush process. I will take full blame for the rush process. I've been pushing the department and the advisory council to move quickly so that we could reach this phase for the end of my term. I admit it may be a bit selfish, but I think it's really important that we have wrap-up periods. And so if it felt rushed, it was because frankly, I was pushing folks to get this done by the end of this year. Director Walker, Dean DeLuca, I'd love for each of you to respond to some of the concerns that were raised by the witnesses here this morning. Director Walker, maybe you want to respond to the comments about the committee makeup and your thoughts in bringing folks to the table.
Thank you, Governor and members of the Land Board. If you'll recall from Senate Bill 1546, it allowed the appointments to be made by in collaboration with the department, Oregon State University, and the Elliott Advisory Committee. So those three were tasked to come up with a slate of candidates that were agreed upon. They did come together. We all came together and had 26 folks on that list, and we pared it down to the 9 you see. My objective was to ensure that those people who had been so committed to this process for nearly 4 years now, and we had carefully chosen them in the beginning when they began this long trek that I promised would only be a year, so no one believes me anymore. But I felt it was important that they be given the priority to serve on this first board if any of them wanted to do that. And then after that, we looked for other expertise. I heard a lot of comments today, and I've read those comments as well, and I appreciate them, that we don't have enough carbon expertise, et cetera, et cetera. Dean DeLuca and I had a conversation not too long ago because one of our staff members here, Ryan Singleton, our forester, will be an ex officio member of the committee to help guide the transition. We can also have other ex officio members of the committee. There's no restriction on that. We discussed that with our counsel, Matt DeVore. Also, there's nothing that prevents the authority board from consulting with experts, which they are quite prepared to do. We've actually had a number of conversations with the advisory committee throughout this 4-year period about carbon. We've had carbon presentations and carbon expertise presented to the committee, and there is just absolutely no reason why we would not continue that, because we actually value that as a part of what the Elliott can provide. So on that point, I think I'd turn it over to the dean if he has anything else to add to that.
Thank you, Vicki. I would just add that OSU has significant carbon expertise within the faculty and staff of the College of Forestry, and our affiliated colleagues at the University of Oregon that we've been working very closely with on the Elliott State Research Forest Management Plan process. So in addition, we just hired 2 new carbon cycling faculty over the last year. We hired 2 new carbon cycling faculty that are outstanding, and one is already engaging directly on the Elliott. And we have a nature-based solutions economist that we've hired. These are all resources that will be brought to bear on the Elliott. And as Vicki indicated, there's also the opportunity for ex officio members to be added to this list. And importantly, too, I'll just say that OSU did not direct the process, which was suggested by one comment, and rather we simply engaged with Department of State Lands and provided the nomination of a few names. And lastly, I'll mention that I am a board member, but a non-voting board member, and I possess expertise in ecosystem ecology and soil microbiology and biochemistry, which involves carbon cycling. So.
Director, could either one of you respond to the comments about the East Hockey Ridge watershed parcel and it's not being included, the entire parcel?
Dean DeLuca, do you want to take that or you want me? I'm understanding we're taking the entire parcel.
That was my
Matt, our counsel can clarify that, but we have a description of that in our motion to delineate the Elliott, and it does include East Hackey Ridge, which was a part of the Elliott. Then it was sold, as you recall, and then the appeals court sent it back and nullified the sale. So it still remains a part of the Elliott.
I think Ms. Etherington was talking about the watershed below the ridge, and I don't know whether that's technically included or not.
I guess we don't know yet, specifically with regard to the watershed below East Hackey Ridge. But East Hackey Ridge is included and
That's what I
it's part
thought.
of the
Okay.
Conservation Reserve.
Okay, perfect. All right. Other concerns. Other concerns included notification of the Loon Lake neighbors.
Governor, I will tell you, we had a robust, transparent public process. Everyone was invited to participate. I don't believe that we sent mailings specifically to those who lived around Loon Lake. But I'm confident they were aware of what we're doing. And I just, OSU went out and had public meetings. We had public meetings. We had public meetings by Zoom and in person prior to the pandemic. So I really don't know what to say about that.
All right, other questions from board members? Treasurer Reed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dean DeLuca, I just am curious what you can tell us about the process as you see it going forward to complete the forest management plan. The director has pointed out we're on track to the substantial completion at this point, but there's more work to do. So I wonder if you could give us a preview of how you see things going forward.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that opportunity. We have a draft of the forest management plan. It is currently 272 pages long and contains significant key sections that we agreed upon would be presented to the board. I'll have to say it is an impressive document. We have more work to do. We have a few additional chapters to put into the forest management plan, and we have to complete chapters that exist within the forest management plan. And really key to this, and this was brought up by Josh Laughlin, we're revisiting financial analysis, both revenue and cost side of the ledger and for the forest management plan, and are confident we will have all of those components completed well before the June 30th or July 1 deadline. We owe it to our Board of Trustees to get them as much of a complete plan as possible in time to vote or give us a feedback on the proposed plan, and that would be for the April Board of Trustees meeting that we'd want to have a really very close to, completion draft document at that time. In other words, all the chapters in place and still in draft form.
And Madam Chair, just one follow-up. Does that, I'm guessing from the way you said that suggests you'll also have time for other stakeholders to comment and provide feedback?
Yes, absolutely. We'll be working with the stakeholder group throughout that process, and as well as with opportunities for public engagement. And we have a extensive number of research faculty and staff that are engaged in the process. I think at one point we had a total of 51 different individuals employed at one level or another working on data collection, writing, and analysis that were going into the forest management plan. And Shannon will share some of that later on this morning.
Done? Okay, thank you, Secretary. Okay. I think there are no further questions. Thank you both very much.
All right, thank you. Dean DeLuca, you want to stay? Who's presenting?
You're not getting away from us yet.
Just grab my wall.
Yeah, so I'll step back and let the OSU team come forward and present the forest management plan. Are you having help on this, Dean?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Fortunately.
All right, come on up, Shannon.
We've all been there, Dean, trust me.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present the forest management plan to you all today. I'm just going to provide some background and context. And I want to start with an enormous thank you to you, Governor Brown, Treasurer Reed, Secretary Fagan, for your foresight, for your trust, for your belief that we can and we will do better as a society, and for investing in the forests of Oregon and beyond. And this research opportunity is far, far bigger than OSU. It's far bigger than Oregon. It's an enormous undertaking, and your foresight is greatly appreciated. I also wanted to thank our DSL partners who we have worked very closely with over the last 4 years, and specifically, I want to call out Vicki Walker and Bill Ryan, Jeff Huntington, Leah, and Ollie, and Ryan Singleton. We have worked very closely together. It hasn't always been easy, but it's been a very effective and committed team, and a huge thank you to all of them. And lastly, or I shouldn't say lastly, thank you to the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, incredible group of people that with very different perspectives and opinions that came to the table and stuck at the table through thick and thin. That gave us advice and that pushed hard on us in all directions. And the proposal and the forest management plan are much better for it. And finally, an enormous thank you to our OSU team who has just done incredible work that will be presented just shortly here. I just wanted to share a little, before Shannon gives the update on the forest management plan and how we've gotten to this final leg on the way to the finish line. The question might be, how did we get here? And some with a cynical outlook might say, well, the state was looking for a way out of the controversy that surrounds the Elliott. The others that possess far greater clarity know exactly why we're here. We're here because Oregon and across the world, we face a climate crisis driven by society's rampant consumption, specifically of fossil fuels, and an inability to see a sensible pathway forward to separate ourselves from this path of destruction. We're also here because we face a massive species extinction crisis fueled by our consumption patterns and lack of understanding how to live in harmony with the broadest array of species. We're here because of the wisdom of those on the state land board who I just mentioned, who saw an opportunity to achieve multiple objectives by transforming the Elliott State Forest into a research forest to not only serve Oregon, but broadly serve the world. This is a big vision. It's a huge investment in the future, but it is a vision. It's visions like this that make a difference. It's visions like this that allow us to step above the din of common criticism and uninformed opinion, and allows us as a society to advance ourselves to a higher level of being. The Land Board recognized that now more than ever, we need good science to guide us and help us avert the many societal, economic, and environmental challenges we face. The Elliott State Research Forest represents a key living laboratory, a shared key state-owned living laboratory to inform how we can meet these challenges. Over the next 3 years, Oregon State University, over the last 3 years, Oregon State University has collaborated with the State Land Board, Department of State Lands, and the Stakeholder Advisory Committee to transform the Elliott into a world-class research forest. The Elliott State Research Forest offers a unique opportunity to demonstrate that managed forests are far more than just sources of timber. A research forest of the size of the Elliott allow us to study how forestry in the 21st century can meet wood and fiber demands of our growing population of 8 billion people who all seek affordable, safe housing, but doing so in a way that minimizes our global carbon footprint and our impact on our environment. Forestry of the 21st century must seek to avert species loss. It needs to support recreational activities and human health and sustain rural economies and skilled jobs and opportunities to combat anthropogenic climate change by advancing forest practices that effectively store carbon in the forest and renewable structural building products. The Elliott State Research Forest will provide an opportunity for OSU researchers and collaborators from other Oregon universities and around the world to develop advanced forest management practices to meet societal, economic, and ecological objectives. In the long run, we hope to see these practices on tens of millions of acres of Pacific Northwest forests that are moving the benefits well beyond just that of the Elliott. The last 2 years, we have taken the research proposal that we presented to you all in December of 2020 and created a forest management plan that will be summarized by Shannon. This plan, again, is the product of numerous researchers, including Jerry Franklin, who has been sitting at the table with us and working with us on a regular basis as part of one of the sub management teams. He's worked with us since spring of 2021 on operationalizing in the research in the form of the forest management plan. We look forward to working with the Transitional Stakeholder Advisory Committee and the transition period from now until January 2024. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon Murray to give this forest management plan update.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Go ahead. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor Brown, Secretary Fagan, Treasurer Reed. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you the progress that Oregon State University and our collaborators and stakeholders have been making on the forest management plan and to give you a sense of the next steps.
Say your full name for the record, please. Sorry.
Yes. Excuse me. My name is Shannon Murray. I'm the program director for the Elliott State Research Forest through Oregon State University. And I'm not sure if this clicker is working. Thank you. So ahead of this meeting, Oregon State University shared a November 2022 working draft of the forest management plan for the Elliott State Research Forest. As Dean DeLuca mentioned, this forest management plan focuses on key priority sections that were identified through working with the Elliott State Research Forest Advisory Committee, and as well as placeholders for additional chapters and sections that are in development according to our timeline. Those key sections are goals and objectives for the Elliott State Research Forest as outlined in Chapter 1, framework for recreation and education planning contained in Chapter 3. And this creates a link with separate recreation and education plans that will be developed according to the direction of Senate Bill 1546. Chapter 4 contains a description of the triad experimental design and early implementation of research on the forest. Chapter 6 contains forest management strategies and harvest operations with guidelines for intensive silviculture, extensive silviculture or ecological forestry, as well as management of reserves, including restoration experiments. Chapter 7 outlines aquatic and riparian research, restoration, and management for those systems, fully integrated with the systems contained in Chapter 6. Chapter 8 outlines the approach for forest carbon, climate change, and adaptive silviculture for climate change. Chapter 9 outlines species conservation strategies for both HCP species, as well as a multi-species conservation strategy that encompasses a broader range of biodiversity. Chapter 10 outlines the monitoring plan for the forest, which is a critical piece of the research, forest, and management. Chapter 11 outlines the draft adaptive research implementation process or adaptive management strategy. So these are the key sections that have been prepared for this November 2022 working draft. These sections have been prepared in alignment with the Elliott State Research Forest research proposal, which was presented to the Land Board in December 2020, as well as the HCP, which we've been coordinating closely with Department of State Lands on as that document has been in development. In addition, this draft incorporates initial analysis results, and this is an ongoing process, and there will be updated information incorporated to future drafts for this spring. The foundation for the Elliott is really built on multiple workflows that have gone into this forest management plan. As Dean DeLuca mentioned, more than 50 people have been part of the work to put together this management plan to date, including through collecting and analyzing data as part of a 2022 field season pilot study, through contributing input and draft text on section drafts, through technical groups that were organized with researchers from Oregon State University, other institutions, members of the advisory committee, and members of agencies. These advisors and reviewers have also helped review the draft, contributed to analysis and modeling. And we have teams from both Oregon State University and University of Oregon contributing to landscape analysis and modeling, as well as teams contributing to updated financial modeling. Key part of the forest management plan and the development process that we've been engaged in is understanding the current conditions on the Elliott State Forest. This forest is a mosaic of different stand conditions and habitats due to its landscape, natural disturbance history, and management history. The 2022 field season that was organized focused on gathering information specifically about fire history, stand ages, site conditions, and biodiversity to help develop more detailed information about these current conditions that go into the development of strategies and implementation outlined in the management plan. This is an example of a stand that shows signs of prior management with stumps hidden under ferns, as you can see in one of the pictures, gaps that create conditions for alder and other species to become a component of the stand, as well as the growth of large trees with big limbs, deep crowns, multiple species, and structural complexity. And so this is an example of a type of stand on the forest that gives us information about the types of conditions that we would aim for with extensive silvicultural ecological forestry, as well as some of the restoration experiments that are outlined in the forest management plan. Those restoration experiments are outlined in chapter 6 and 7 of the draft that was shared, and are really highlighted by a reserve restoration experiment in the conservation research watersheds, as well as a riparian restoration experiment in riparian conservation areas. And this research is aimed at studying approaches for transitioning dense Douglas fir plantations that are less than 65 years old, an example of which is shown on the photo on the left, to more complex forest structures with multiple age classes. shown by through the photo on the right. Another component that is being woven into the forest management plan is a nest tree coring study related to marbled murrelets. And this is a really important part of the species conservation strategy and the research being planned for the Elliott State Research Forest. MSU is leveraging data collected by the College of Forestry on known marbled murrelet nest sites in the Oregon Coast Range to look at disturbance history and features of late successional forests that support the species. And this information can be used to inform how we manage and restore stands using natural disturbance patterns as a guide to create habitat for nesting murrelets. Monitoring is a critical component of the research program and is also closely tied to the adaptive management strategy for the forest. There's scientific knowledge of ecosystem dynamics on the forest, detailed and long-term monitoring to track changes will inform adjustments to management and research activities over time. The draft forest management plan describes a rigorous monitoring program made up of multiple components outlined here, as well as a three-tiered approach to adaptive management that begins at a scale of scientific and experimental design and progresses to a second tier that would involve minor adaptive changes to the research program, as well as a third tier that would involve more significant changes that would require updates to the forest management plan, which are anticipated to happen on a 10-year timescale. The monitoring program outlined here is a robust program that includes forest inventory and carbon plots, a network of permanent inventory plots across the forest, with aerial LiDAR being flown every 10 years, and additional transects. The aquatic and riparian systems monitoring program looks at riparian vegetation as part of those permanent inventory plots and LiDAR, as well as monitoring of floodplains, restoration, landslides, water quality and quantity, stream wood loading, and biodiversity, including but not limited to fish populations. A component of the monitoring program focuses on climate and microclimate, with a plan for a network of 20 climate stations spread across the forest and microclimate transects to understand variations on a smaller landscape scale. Monitoring to look at forest management and economics includes understanding local economic impacts of employment for research programs and management activities, timber harvesting and contracting, as well as understanding human ecosystem relationships and recreation, visitor use patterns on the forest, educational and public access use, environmental impact of that use, and values related to the research forest over time. And finally, a sixth major area looks at biodiversity, with a permanent network of biodiversity plots in both the conservation research watersheds and the management research watersheds. And a pilot study was completed this past summer with 56 plots that will be expanded upon, using a system that monitors both small and medium carnivores, insects, soil microbes, birds, bats, and a wide variety of animals. The work that was done this summer involved students from Oregon State University, University of Oregon, and Southwest Oregon Community College, and was led by a team of PhD and postdoc level researchers. And this is an example of the type of collaboration that we're really excited about moving forward with the Elliott. The management plan itself and plans for the Elliott State Research Forest also incorporate the use of emerging technology into what we're learning about forest ecosystem dynamics. Examples of this are being piloted as part of the forest management plan and are included here. The photo on the right shows imagery from aerial LiDAR that was flown in 2021 that is being used to develop a forest inventory. And you can see here an example of two different management units or stands, where on the left, the the really dense dots. Each dot is the top of a tree. And so you're looking at, on the left, a dense plantation, and on the right, an area where you have gaps that are shown in the dark blue. Those are shorter trees and vegetation, with taller trees being shown in yellow, orange, and red. And so you can see an example here of the type of forest structure we saw a couple of slides back, with trees of multiple age classes, different sizes, compared to a plantation. So we can get a different view of the forest and an understanding of what is happening from the scale of an individual tree all the way up to the full landscape. And these other two images are also taken from that LiDAR, showing images of branch structure, of snags, dead standing trees, as well as information about the topography and landscape. And so this is an example of how technology is being incorporated into the forest management plan, as well as into the monitoring that is being planned for the forest. I'd like to take a few moments to talk about some of the information that is being learned about the forest already and is being incorporated into planning. And as you can see here, this involves group efforts from many, many people. So one is looking more closely at that LiDAR-based forest inventory. And this inventory has mapped approximately 10.4 million canopy trees, so dominant and co-dominant trees across the forest. We have the location of individual trees, as well as variables that can be calculated for the tree, so we can get an understanding of bone structure, of diameter, of density of stands, and use that for planning, management, research, and conservation. Additionally, we're working on handheld LiDAR, so ground-based LiDAR, which would work from the bottom up. And so what you're seeing is an example of technology that allows us to take a top-down view of the forest combined with a bottom-up approach to get a really clear understanding of what these forest ecosystems look like. And we can use the models and calculated attributes to grow the forest forward under different management scenarios, which is part of the landscape modeling that's happening during the forest management plan development. In addition, we can understand characteristics about the forest down to the scale of an individual tree. And so from the data that we have from this inventory, the tallest tree on the forest that we found is a Douglas fir in Luder Creek, which is part of the conservation research watersheds, that's 290 feet tall. And so really, it's an amazing opportunity to take a broad view of the forest down to the scale of an individual tree. A team of researchers this past summer also collected preliminary stream temperature data through deploying a series of sensors along First Creek and the mainstem Millicoma in midsummer during a very warm period to try and begin to understand some of the differences within these systems. And so just from this preliminary data, we're understanding that there are differences from maximum and minimum temperatures in these two systems that indicate that, for example, Fish Creek might be more potentially sensitive system because it has greater temperature variability, versus the Millicoma River has features that create greater resilience. And so this is the type of information that would help direct where and how the monitoring plan is implemented, as well as directing research and restoration efforts in these systems. Another component that is contributed to the draft at this stage is developing a better understanding of disturbance history on the Elliott, and this was part of the 2022 field season work. That work is currently in analysis, but initial results indicate that fires historically were much more frequent than current publications and models tell us, particularly for the Elliott and surrounding region where this data was collected, and that low and moderate severity fires were an important part of the fire regime to developing late successional and old growth forest structures. And so this is an example of learning from the past and understanding how these forests were formed to help guide the research and management on the forest. We've also had a team working on landslide mapping using that LiDAR data from 2021 and understanding differences and patterns based on geomorphology from the west side to the east side of the forest. And this is an important research tool as well as a decision support tool. These are landslides that happened on geological time and so are not necessarily active, but the inventory gives us important information about disturbance history, foundational data that can be used by researchers and built on over time, and helps guide decisions about how and when to consult geotechnical experts for activities on the forest. Looking ahead, the FMP draft alongside the Habitat Conservation Plan and the research proposal lay the foundation for management of the forest. And this work together has already started to generate interest in research collaborations internationally. We've had inquiries from researchers from the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and other countries, as well as opportunities for partnerships developing. For example, with the National Institute of Forest Science in South Korea. And this is a photo of 2 forest scientists from that institution who came to visit as they are considering and exploring developing a research forest of their own on a watershed scale. We've also been engaging with the Olympic Experimental State Forest in Washington State, as well as the H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest here in Oregon. And most recently had an inquiry from a group working on planning watershed scale research at the Great Bear Rainforest in British Columbia. The work that has been done by the advisory committee and by collaborators on the forest management plan, the habitat conservation plan, and the research proposal has also led to successful competitive funding opportunities, in part supporting continued work on biodiversity monitoring, as well as supporting continued work for multiple proposals in progress. And so this represents really the tip of the iceberg for opportunities that we can see for research and supporting research management on the forest. Next steps are continuing to work with researchers, forest management experts, advisors, reviewers, and other stakeholders on the additional sections still to be developed for the forest management plan draft, as well as continuing to incorporate edits, updated analysis into existing draft sections. We are also tracking public comments and reviewing them systematically to address feedback as draft sections are developed and updated. And we look forward to continuing this work in coordination with DSL and the advisory committee and presenting the full forest management plan to the State Land Board for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from board members?
Madam Chair, I'd feel a little inadequate if I didn't ask something because you've done a lot of work here. What do you feel like is missing? What are you most worried about or feeling challenged by in the work to come?
That's a great question. I think a challenge that everyone involved with the Elliott has faced all along is that this is an incredibly complex system and a big vision for the forest. And so there are a lot of moving parts and components, and each one impacts another. And so that's something that as we've been working on the forest management plan, we've had multiple areas where the feedback and analysis needs to be considered, not just for the specific topic that is being addressed, but for the full scope of the research forest. And so it's a challenge of zooming in and then zooming out and making sure that all the components appear to be aligning for successful implementation of the research forest. And so that's something that involves a lot of people and is a challenge, but is something that we've been working through together.
It's a good way of putting it. Zooming in and zooming out. It reminds me of John Muir's quote about the most difficult thing about grabbing onto one thing is finding that it's hooked to everything else. Appreciate the way you put that. Thank you.
I'm assuming from your comments that you see the plan as almost a living document. that it will, that this is an iterative process, that it will change over time based on the science and the data, obviously as the climate changes and impacts the forest as well. Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Governor. This forest management plan, alongside the habitat conservation plan and the research proposal, provides that foundation. And so that foundation needs to be solid for the research forest. And so in one sense, I think this management plan is a living document in that we need to learn from the research, the monitoring, adaptive management, continued input from advisors and the board of directors and researchers, so that we are truly learning from the forest and making adjustments to research and management along the way. But on top of that, because this is the first management plan for the forest, it does also really need to lay the foundation for a longer term vision and longer term support for the management in the forest. And so that's also another balancing act, creating a management plan that is strong and has a vision for the forest that can be built on over time, but also allows for the flexibility in decades to come for that plan to be updated as we learn more and as research questions change for the forest. So to answer your question more succinctly, I think that this plan and the research vision, they're outlined in the research proposal, really set the stage for a long-term view. It's not thinking of the research forest for 10 years, it's thinking 100 years and beyond. But we know that there will be changes over time based on what we learn, and that one of the things that the forest management plan can do is bring together the tools, the governance structure, the monitoring and adaptive management components to allow that to happen.
When we went down this path, I won't speak for my other board members, but I was pretty committed to making sure that the community, the region that relies, at least in some part, on timber, that there would be some economic benefits for the region. Could you talk a little bit about what you anticipate might be the harvest off of the forest under this plan and the impact in the area?
So as part of the research proposal and the management planning process, we've been undergoing a series of modeling efforts and financial analysis. And that is in progress right now. There's updates on that financial analysis happening. The current plan, and in coordination with the Habitat Conservation Plan, it has a series of components that direct how harvest under the research program would happen. And so the research program lays out an initial estimate of approximately 17 million board feet per year, provided by the combination of intensive, extensive, and restoration. And that is an average. So that will fluctuate partially because of the different age classes across the forest. An additional component is adding a harvest cap under the Habitat Conservation Plan. And so that's something that we're continuing to work on modeling right now. The economic benefits that are to the local communities that are anticipated are through direct contracts for management activities on the forest, for timber harvest under the research program and restoration activities, for working on the research program, as well as educational opportunities that would happen alongside of it. And as we continue to update those financial projections, we can share those updated numbers with you as soon as we have them.
And you mentioned that, did you want to add something to that? No, okay, all right. You mentioned about fire, and that it looks like from the data and the research that there was more fire on the landscape in previous decades. obviously, I'm assuming that we have removed fire, and I'm just curious to hear from you or the dean what role you see for fire in the future, knowing that, you know, we're struggling with this issue throughout the entire West.
That's a really important question and part of the research opportunities, I think, on the forest. And so what we're already starting to learn from the data is that fire was more frequent in the 1800s on the forest, including some of those low and moderate severity fires. The plan that we have in place under the Forest Management Plan and under the Habitat Conservation Plan allows for fire protection. And so that's built into the budget across the entire forest, with the ability to understand differences in how we approach fire through restoration activities, particularly in those dense plantations, as well as in natural stands that exist on the forest. And understand different approaches to salvage and post-fire management. And so in the conservation research watersheds, there are no post-fire salvage activities allowed, whereas in the management research watersheds, there could be directed by current science. And so part of the approach is understanding how we manage to try to support and promote resilience of the forest to fire, as well as understanding what activities post-fire may happen to also increase forest health and reduce the chances that a fire may come through again. But alongside of that, fire protection and suppression when fires do happen is a critical component of that management.
And then finally, at least for me, I think the other reason why we're here is the creatures that inhabit the forest. And I'd be very interested to hear from you what you think, how optimistic, how hopeful are you in terms of the endangered species that are there on the forest, that the system we have moving forward will provide them with the opportunity to thrive. I think one of the numbers that was always key for me in voting to keep the Elliott Forest in public hands is the percentage of coastal coho that come off of the forest. So I'd be very interested to hear your perspective on our ability to ensure that these species that are endangered or threatened can thrive under this proposal moving forward.
Species conservation on the Elliott is a critical part of the research program and the management program. And so throughout this process, we've been engaging with Department of State Lands on the Habitat Conservation Plan development and through their engagement with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and NOAA, as well as through additional engagement with other agencies, including ODF and ODFW, so that as we're continuing to do analysis on the plan and create guidelines for how the forest will be managed, we're consulting with those experts and understanding what the state of the science is saying for best management practices and conservation. As a whole, the forest under this research program has 2/3 of the acres in either reserve or riparian conservation areas. And those areas are either in complete reserve, or in the case of dense Douglas fir stands, there will be restoration activities to help transition those areas to those more complex structures that we anticipate would be able to support those endangered and threatened species. In addition, there's, as I mentioned earlier, this mosaic of conditions across the landscape. And so really at a landscape scale, you're looking from complex early cereal habitat all the way through late successional and old growth habitat. And so our understanding and the effort put into this plan is to really allow for the creation of habitat, the support and maintenance of existing habitat, and really close monitoring to understand where the populations of endangered and threatened species are on the forest, and be able to understand more about their life histories, about conservation strategies and management strategies that support their populations continuing to thrive in the future. And so that's a key component and something that we've been working very closely on.
I don't have any further questions. Secretary Fagan, go ahead.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for the presentation. I don't have to tell you, obviously, that the public has been and will continue to be very interested in both the development of the plan, but the implementation of what we're working on here now and in years to come. What is the best and easiest way for the public to stay engaged with what's going on?
So at this stage, with the development of the forest management plan, we have been holding a series of listening sessions, both in person and online. And we'll be continuing to do that throughout the course of the development of this plan, as well as making available online through both the Department of State Lands website and OSU's website information about the status of the draft. In the future, and this is included in sections that are on development for the forest management plan draft, public outreach and transparency and communication are critical to the functioning of this research forest. And so what is envisioned for the forest is publicly accessible data and information so that researchers, citizen scientists, any member of the public can be able to access the information that's coming off the forest, as well as engage with the research and management staff and the board of directors through the public process that will be happening to govern the forest. And that includes the public availability of biennial operations reports and plans before they're approved by the board of directors. So that's another key area where the public and stakeholders can really stay engaged with the process and have their voices heard.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. I don't see any further questions. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you very much.
All right. Governor, if we're ready, we'll move on to agenda item D.
I think we're ready.
And this is the moment I know specifically that you've been waiting for before you leave office. And we are so excited to be at this point. Let me turn to item 3. Yes. Oh, shoot. Thank you, Jeff. I'm glad I appointed you the acting executive director because I have totally spaced it out. We are going to hear from the advisory committee, various members of the advisory committee. So I don't want to trump their ability to come and talk about the work they've been doing. So who is coming up first?
Okay. They're all coming up. All right. Coming up.
All right. Let us know if you need another chair.
Okay.
Aaron's got one. Thanks for doing that.
Governor Brown, Secretary of State Fagan, and Treasurer Reed, I get a bat lead off today. And I'd like to point out that one of the members of the advisory committee is not here with us in person, but is here online, and that's Mike Kennedy. And I think he will have comments to make today as well. So once again, it is a privilege to speak for the advisory committee and to speak before you today. For nearly 4 years, the members of the Elliott State Research Forest
Could you
Advisory
please identify yourself for the record? We know who you are, but
Keith
for the record.
member of the advisory committee from Reedsport. For nearly 4 years, the members of the Elliott State Research Forest Advisory Committee have engaged in the process of trying to turn a state forest dedicated to supporting Oregon schools into an Elliott State Research Forest dedicated to scientific inquiry on a range of forestry-related issues. This undertaking was historic, unusual, sometimes contentious, most often collaborative, wildly frustrating at times, but ultimately rewarding for those of us who care deeply about the future of Oregon's first state forest. So deeply, as it turns out, that we stayed on task and stretched our 12-month commitment to Director Walker, then a 14-month commitment to Director Walker, to now 45 months. She owes us overtime, with the help of the aim of helping the land board and your vision take shape. Moving together needs and desires of the Oregon Department of State Lands, Oregon State University, all of our stakeholders and the public was always going to be complicated and difficult. However, the collective effort has accomplished much of what we set out to do, and our advisory committee members are deservedly proud of the work we've done, but understanding we have much yet to do. That said, to a person, we know there are key remaining work products to be completed and milestones to be met in 2023. The new Elliott State Research Forest Authority is to become reality. While you may hear more specifics from individual committee members, the following are some key remaining issues that must be resolved as we move forward. One, revamping OSU's financial plan to ensure the forest will be financially self-supporting, even in the most challenging economic environments. Two, arriving at contract terms for operation of the forest by OSU that reflect an appropriate balance between the university and the new executive branch authority agency board that has oversight roles and responsibilities, as well as meet the approval of the Elliott State Research Forest Authority Board and the Department of State Lands. And three, completing a forest management plan and its provisions needed to provide necessary detail on the number of important items, which include, but are not limited to, how different types of harvest treatments will be implemented, protections researchers will take when experiments involve murrelet habitat, and fully develop plans for integrating important programs into the future of the forest, such as traditional indigenous knowledge, recreation use, and the utilization of carbon markets and carbon storage, as you've heard today. Completing this and other necessary work with transparency and the active, timely engagement of stakeholders and the public will be key to whether we are successful in establishing and launching the new research forest. This will be good governance provided by the soon-to-be meeting ESRF Authority Board of Directors. Purpose of this letter that I'm reading to you, and I believe you have copies of or will, is to provide more than a status update at this inflection point. The Elliott State Research Forest Advisory Committee knows that throughout all of our deliberations for nearly 4 years, our discussions and debates throughout our hundreds of hours of meetings, that the members of the State Land Board have unfailingly supported our efforts and guided and trusted in us to find a way to deliver our charge. The trust you have had in us and for your great support, the members of the Elliott State Research Forest Advisory Committee, to a person wish to offer our sincere appreciation. Without the unwavering support of the members of the Land Board, this collaboration would not have succeeded as it has, and we would not be here today. It is easy to forget that leadership of note is only sometimes flashy. Most often it is focused, steadfast, and deliberate. For your focused, steadfast, and deliberate leadership on the issue of the Elliott State Research Forest, we wish to say thank you, Governor Brown, Secretary Fagan, and Treasurer Reed. We're truly grateful for the support you have provided, and we recognize the critical role you have played and will continue to play. Sincerely, the members of the Elliott State Research Forest Advisory Committee.
Apparently I'm up. My name is Ken McCall, and I've served on the Elliott Committee as a recreation representative primarily. My affiliation is with a hunting group. I'd like to share my perspective here very quickly. I think we'll see how it goes. I tend to ramble. There's lots and lots to talk about, but my perspective is a fourth generation Native Oregonian. I spent my life, my career life, in forest planning, majority of that on the Siuslaw National Forest, adjacent to and once part of the Elliott. or vice versa. And what I'd like to really focus on really quickly is that the people of Oregon, be those the original people of Oregon or the current residents of Oregon, cannot overstate the value of public lands in the state of Oregon. And what we've done with your support is to come up with a framework at minimum that we can operate going forward with the Elliott retained as a piece of public real estate in the state. We love that. We all know the basics of the history of the Elliott, and the other piece of my background is I'm an amateur history buff from the get-go. I've lived in these forests all my life. But the Elliott, as we know, 1930 was the inflection point for the Elliott when it became a state forest, separated off in a huge exchange of lands between the U.S. Forest Service and the state of Oregon, which was unparalleled and probably is unparalleled in the nation. It was just a brilliant idea to take these small sections of common school lands across the state of Oregon that were embedded within the national forest and turn them into a single block of forest that could be managed by the state of Oregon going forward for the benefit of the Common School Fund. That said, the project that led to that exchange was a huge one, and I'll compare that to the project we've done here. And I think the primary difference was in the late 20s. It was a 3 to 4 year process, similar to what we have here, that involved a number of people on a landscape that is vertical and almost impenetrable in a number of places. To appraise and to compare these lands and come up with a fair exchange. That's a huge job. What this committee has done is, I think, also a huge job, but we got to stay indoors for the most part, and we didn't have to deal with the vertical landscape of the Elliott. And I can assure you that I am very familiar with vertical landscapes, having spent my life on the Siuslaw. From the past to present, humans have enjoyed living, working, and recreating on the Elliott and other public lands. Again, cannot overstate the value of those. So as has been said, here we are with a lot done and a lot to do. So I'll speak briefly here, a few bullet points about some of what I think needs to be done from recreation, education, and access point of view that melds with the forest plan. First up, we need a very robust system to have a visitor use plan, which is essentially a recreation plan for the forest. Shannon has spoken a bit about melding the recreation with other elements on the forest. It is really, really important. We're going to have a lot of public for who knows how many hundreds of years going forward that will discover the Elliott. The Elliott is not a common place like, say, Mount Hood or the Sisters Area Bend that you can go to regularly or that people go to regularly to recreate. They will discover it and they will enjoy that vertical landscape. Second and very important thing that I believe we need is, again, robust, I'll use that word, but a very robust look at the roads on the Elliott. Roads are critical to access for recreation, for operations on the forest, and for the public to recreate on the forest. But roads are also tough on the landscape. Again, part of my background on the Siuslaw was implementing a travel management plan on the forest. And the objective there was to have, when we were done with that plan, a minimum number of roads and a minimum set of impacts and a minimum cost of a road system. So those two things I think are very important. Shannon also mentioned jobs in the woods at Governor Brown's question. That is very, very critical for the local communities on the coast that are adjacent to and around the Elliott. I think that is incredibly important. And lastly, I want to remind you, and I don't want you to take this lightly, and I certainly don't take this lightly, but in 1859, the state of Oregon had 3.6 million acres of common school lands that are public lands. At this point in time, we have somewhat less than 800,000. I think the number is pretty close to 780,000 acres. The value of those acres, again, I'm going to repeat myself, cannot be overstated. I told Governor Brown and I think Treasurer Reed also at the August 2017 ceremony, we had the signing ceremony for Governor Roblin's Senate Bill 847, which started the decoupling process. I told you I'm a free range kid from Terrebonne, Oregon, and I grew up running around the public lands before I even realized they were public lands. And again, the value can't be overstated. So thank you, Governor. Thank you, Secretary, and thank you, Treasurer. And my thanks also to Vicki Walker and crew at the Department of State Lands and to Tom DeLuca and his group at Oregon State University. So I remain not candidate or a selected person for the upcoming board, but I am always willing to help. Thank you.
Good morning, Governor Brown, Treasurer Reed, and Secretary of State Fagan. I'm Melissa Cribbins. I'm a Coos County Commissioner and a member of the Advisory Committee. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve. Director Walker is always mentioning that we served for a lot longer than we expected, and I would have never told her this before. It always reminds me of when I was in college and I had a professor that every time you asked how long the paper had to be, he would say long enough to cover the topic. And I believe that's what we've done here today. I'm a big believer in process, and we've needed this much time really to cover the topic. There hasn't been a lot of wasted time. There's been a lot of time. It takes time to build trust. It takes time to build relationships, and it unfortunately takes time to compromise. So I know a lot of these topics have already been covered, so I will be brief in my remarks. On behalf of the citizens of Coos County, I can't speak on behalf of the state, but I can say on behalf of the citizens of Coos County, thank you for keeping the Elliott State Forest public. I might even be able to speak on behalf of Douglas County because, you know, they're kind of right next door to us. But anyway, we appreciate you keeping the Elliott State Forest public. I also appreciate the concern about the local economic impacts. Coos County has been economically depressed since somewhere around 1989. Coos County has no interest in returning into any sort of dependence on a single industry, but much like a quilt, every piece of our economic puzzle that we can put together is helpful to our citizens and much appreciated. I really do believe that this represents the best possible outcome for all of the citizens of the state. And I want you all to know that I appreciate your courage and leadership and support throughout this whole process. I do know as elected officials, you don't get a lot of thank you emails. And I appreciate the fact that you stood by the advisory committee and supported us through this whole process. So thank you very much. Who's next?
Good morning, Governor Brown, Treasurer Reed, and Secretary of State Fagan. My name is Bob Salinger. I'm the Conservation Director for Pearl and Audubon Society. I appreciate the opportunity to be here to celebrate what Treasurer Reed described as the end of the beginning, although I kind of think about it as volume 3 out of maybe. It's been a long road. I thank just a few folks. I want to express my appreciation to the stakeholder committee that stuck through this for 4 years. And is continuing, several of us are continuing. I would continue to take that kind of collaboration, cooperation, and trust building to make this successful. OSU and DSL for all their hard work. To Peter Harkema, who has shepherded a lot of these most difficult processes, whether it's out in Harney County or the PFA or this. Peter's done some really remarkable work. I want to express my appreciation to the land board staff. You're kind of the unsung heroes. Molly, Jason, and especially Dimitri, who is always available to, just work through problems and try and work through those. And to you, the land board, for sticking with this, for your vision, for your confidence, for your support. I want to take pause and particularly appreciate Governor Brown as you exit office for taking on some of the most difficult natural resource issues in Oregon, for bringing people together, for sticking with it, and for really doing the hard work, for rolling up your sleeves and getting in there and actually participating. You're going to be remembered for a lot of things that you've done during your term. I will remember you as the governor that stood up for salamanders.
It's high praise coming from you.
looking at today as kind of an interim check-in. The big work comes really in July when we make final decisions. And I think that's really important to recognize that this is an interim check-in, that the work is a work in progress for this phase, and that we have a lot of work to do. We need to keep the pedal to the metal. There are hard decisions ahead. There's a lot of work between here and July. And I'm excited about where we're at, but we have a long way to go to get over the hump that is right in front of us now. I want to flag a couple of issues for you. Some of them have already been flagged. One of them is public process. I think we've improved. I still think we have a long way to go. You've heard some of those issues described today. I won't repeat them, but I think the challenge going forward from here today forward is to make sure that we truly manage this as a public forest. That means the state stepping up, DSL stepping up, and this first board stepping up. And I think that's one of the big things this first board of directors really needs to focus on, is how do we do really good, inclusive public process. It's not just about the stakeholders that are at the table. That's about the public that ultimately owns this forest. Number two, decoupling. I think that's a big moment we can celebrate today, that we're doing the decoupling, and we're fully supportive of including East Tacky Ridge. My hope is that as we go forward, we're going to think about all those other parcels that are adjacent to and nearby. We really need to consolidate these landscapes and manage them more holistically. So I think that's another real opportunity that comes with this. And I think about the trust land transfer bill that was passed a couple of sessions ago that can help with that kind of work. This is an exciting moment, and thank you for including East Tacky Ridge. The new board, I'm proud to be part of that new board, and also agree with some of the concerns that have been raised. I think climate is a very important piece of that puzzle. It's one thing to have that expertise to tap into. It's another thing to have it on the board. That's a different thing. I think it's also fair to say that I think it does tilt toward timber. The forest management plan, that's the big one. We have a huge amount of work to go. We have made a lot of progress. I would say we just kind of squeezed under the bar or over the bar for the expectations we had for that at this point. It's pretty close. I wish we were further down the road. 3 areas that we have been working on that I want to flag for you that still have a lot of work to go are the Merlet chapter, the extensive forestry chapter, and the triad design chapter. But as you already heard, there's a lot of chapters that aren't even written yet. So again, we have 6 months to get this done, and we need to leave adequate time for the public to really review and weigh in. That's critical. That means we really have, 4.5 months. So we got to hustle. Financial plan is not complete. We hope that would be done by this time. And also OSU still has to go through its approval process. On both of those, I think it's really important to recognize that we have a lot of agreements in place. Those can't really shift. That's what got us to this point. So these pieces that are coming in need to connect back to those. When OSU approves, it's also going to be important that agreement get put through these processes as well, so that we make sure there is consistency there. I'll end today by just noting that some of you may have heard that I am leaving Portland Audubon on February 1st after 30 years there. I'm not retiring. I'm just moving on to the next phase of my career. You don't really retire from nonprofits. You just keep moving. But as I look back on 30 years with Portland Audubon, being involved with the Elliott really for a very long time has been one of the highlights, especially as we've taken one of Oregon's most conflicted landscapes and moved it to consensus, to collaboration, and into a new era. So thank you for allowing me to be part of this.
Good morning, Governor Brown, Secretary Fagan, and Treasurer Reed. I'm Mark Stern, and I'm a member of the advisory committee here. And I want to begin by thanking all of you for your support for the Elliott process, and also, as others have acknowledged, the support and leadership provided by Vicki Walker, her staff at the DSL, as well as our partnerships with OSU and with Peter Harkema and his crew as well. Reiterate my support and enthusiasm for the Elliott process, as you've heard from my colleagues here in the advisory committee. And I guess I'd share a couple of reflections with you. The forest management plan, a lot has been accomplished. Shannon and others at OSU have shepherded that process. I would second, as Bob mentioned, there's still a lot of work to do. Treasurer Reed, you asked, what would you look for? What do you think are the hard parts to continue to track? And I would offer, I think we need to really settle on the harvest treatments and the acreage caps that have been identified there. I think we also want to make sure that the experimentation in older forests and with marbled violets is consistent with the established protocol and doesn't jeopardize the species. And as Ken mentioned, I think the road management issue, while in some ways it might sound easy, I think we're all familiar with the challenges of the Forest Service encountered with travel management on their lands was really big. And I think that needs to be attended to. The other point in the management plan, and Anna mentioned it, is there'll be treatments in some of the plantations within the reserve areas. Most of that's scheduled for the first 10 to 20 years. And I think that really needs to be thought through and scripted as we move forward. We also heard a fair bit of reference to climate this morning, and I guess Governor Brown, I don't know if it applies, but if your executive order on climate applies to the authority and to the Elliott State Forest and to helping us achieve our climate goals by 2040, it'd be nice to see that acknowledged and incorporated into the forest management plan as well. The second reflection really has to do with the vision that all of you laid out. 2 years ago, you adopted the OSU proposal and approved that. That proposal was really what went forward, and Senate Bill 1546 codified not only that proposal, but a lot of the vision and the guidelines and the parameters that went with the forest. Those two documents, along with the Habitat Conservation Plan, which should be finalized in the coming year, are really the foundational documents that set the parameters and the sideboards for what will go forward. And I guess I would ask, and I would hope that the Land Board continue to be actively attentive to the process, to the forest management plan as it's developed, to ensure that what happens next is consistent with these foundational documents, because those are the documents that really laid out the vision that you scripted and that we've been trying to bring forward as well. So in closing, just as a personal aside on a slightly different topic, I also serve on the advisory committee for ODF&W's Conservation and Recreation Fund. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you, Governor, and you, Jason, for appointing me to that committee. I think it's really been remarkable what it's gone through in the first few years and has a really promising future here within the department for the state. So thank you for that. Also in that role, as a member of OCRF, I'll be one of the people serving on the Private Forest Accord Committee, because one of the slots from OCRF goes over to that. And although this will
Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you for your service and dedication. We really appreciate your volunteering for all of this work.
And I was going to say, though, this may be the end of the beginning for me on the Elliott Advisory Committee, and I appreciate that. It feels like the beginning of the beginning on volume 4 on the Private Forest Accord. So we'll see. Anyway, in closing, I just really thank all of you and your staff, and again, especially for Dimitri, for advancing the effort to where we are today. So thank you for that.
I think
Sorry, and Mike Kennedy is also on the advisory committee, and I believe he was going to speak virtually.
Mike, you're up. He was up earlier a lot.
Yes.
He popped up every time one of the witnesses didn't show up.
There he is.
Yeah, okay. Mary, would you like to pop in here? Mary Paulson.
Thank you and good morning. I would have nothing to add that hasn't already been said. It has been an honor and a privilege for me personally and professionally to work with this great advisory committee. And I do very much appreciate the Land Board and Director Walker's work on something that Oregonians will benefit from forever. So thank you.
Any luck with Mike Kennedy? All right. Okay. I'm sorry we missed him. Thank you all very much. Your comments were excellent. I'm going to pick on you because you're sort of retiring. Just want to say thank you for your extraordinary work over the years. I do think it's fair to say we would not be here today without your persistence, your passion, and maybe your patience at times. And so just really want to say thank you and wish you the best in your next chapter as well. And I think my mother will like the nickname Governor Salamander. Her name is Sally, so I think she'll feel some connectivity there. So I think we're going to do some more thank yous in the next couple of agenda items, but just really appreciate all of you being here, all of your hard work. Truly, this is a Margaret Mead moment that wouldn't have happened with all of you working together, and never doubt the ability of a small, thoughtful, committed group of individuals to change the world. Indeed, is the only thing that ever has. So without all of you, this would not have happened. So thank you.
Regularly scheduled programming.
Now back to our regular scheduled program. Yes.
All right. Well, that was certainly delightful to hear from the advisory committee. We feel like a family. Families, they hug, they love, they fight, they argue, but generally they come together in the end, and we have done that well. And Peter Harkema is owed some special kind of presentation and award for having to put up with me, who constantly went off script during meetings, but I think Peter got used to it, and he's very skilled at what he does. So thank you, Peter. All right, well, now we're back to the decoupling moment. That's item 3 on your agenda for those of you who are listening in. So the issue before you is whether the State Land Board should take final action to sever the Elliott State Forest and East Hackey Ridge forest lands from fiduciary management responsibilities associated with the Common School Fund established by the Admission Act of 1859. And the authorities are set out below in the agenda item. So I'm not going to go through all the staff report. It's available to you and to the public. And as the report indicates, all necessary steps, all steps to decouple the forest from the Common School Fund have been taken, including depositing $221 million into the fund. Therefore, the department's recommendation will be to take formal action today to decouple, and I'll have that formal recommendation for you here in a moment. The East Hackey Ridge parcel has always been part of the Elliott State Forest. As you know, it has a complicated recent history after being carved out for a proposed sale, and then subject of lengthy litigation that resulted in nullification of the sale. So given this, the decoupling agenda item specifically calls out inclusion of the 788-acre parcel to be included with the rest of the Elliott for your motion and action today. And the management of this parcel will be determined by the authority board for any of those who are questioning what we were going to be doing with that. I believe that we've covered all of the points getting us to this section. We've managed to meet your vision. We've put together a plan that I think is very successful. The HCP is coming to a close next year, and we're so thrilled to be asking you today. Matt DeVore and I are here. Matt's our esteemed legal counsel. We can answer any questions you might have. The lands are described in Appendix B and C, and the appraisal is linked at Appendix A, but the lands are described in B and C, and this is the legal description, which is kind of an interesting read, actually. I found it fascinating to read through it, how they describe various parcels. But once we take the vote on decoupling, then we will take a vote on designating the lands and delineating that, and that will be using the same legal description you see here. So back to the staff recommendation, the department recommends the State Land Board approve decoupling the Elliott State Forest, including the East Hackey Ridge parcel as described in Appendix B and C to this agenda item from the Common School Fund. We have met the requirement of Senate Bill 1546, Section 31, Sub 2, Sub A and B, which now requires a vote of the Land Board.
Thank you, Director Walker. The chair is going to make the motion, and that is the chair moves that the State Land Board approve decoupling the Elliott State Forest, including the East Hackey Ridge parcel as described in Appendix B and C to this agenda item from the Common School Fund.
I'm sure I'm happy to second the motion.
Treasurer Reed, we're going to let you second the motion. Any opposition to the motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion is approved.
I'm so honored to be here and to be a part of this. This has really been incredible. We will move to agenda item 4 then, which is whether the State Land Board should act to delineate specific forest lands to be managed by the Elliott State Research Forest Authority pursuant to provisions of Senate Bill 1546 passed by the Oregon Legislature in 2022, and the authorities are set out below. I have to say, all of us were legislators, and it's funny how during your lifetime, you never forget a bill number that was really critical to your work that you do, and Senate Bill 1546 is going to be one of those. Senate Bill 1546 specifically requires the Land Board to delineate the lands, which will constitute the new Elliott State Research Forest. The forest will have a new name today. Lands designated will become the responsibility of the state agency created by the legislation, and that agency is appropriately called the Elliott State Research Forest Authority, and becomes effective January 1, 2024, once all elements of Senate Bill 1546 have been met. Appendices A and B are the legal descriptions of those lands, which were the legal descriptions you just saw in item 3. And our legal counsel is here to answer any questions if you have any, and if you have none, I'll make the formal recommendation. All right, no questions. Quiet day for you, Mr. DeVore, but it has not been prior to this meeting, let me tell you. The department recommends the State Land Board find and resolve that the Elliott State Research Forest shall be comprised of the lands described in Appendix A and B and be subject to the governance and management responsibilities set forth in Senate Bill 1546 as adopted by the Oregon Legislature in 2022. Treasurer Reed.
Madam Chair, I appreciate the momentum we've got going here, so I'm happy to move approval of the recommendation, the finding and resolution that the Elliott State Research Forest be comprised of the lands described in Appendix A and B and subject to the governance and management responsibilities set forth in Senate Bill 1546.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
I see a second from Secretary Fagan. Hearing and seeing no opposition, the motion is approved.
Thank you. And as I sat here, I thought, well, it's Appendix B and C in item 3, but it's A and B in item 4. I should have made that more consistent, but I think we all understood what happened there. All right, now we get to the point where I'm very excited to indenture some folks a little bit longer in the service to the state and the Elliott. Agenda item 5 is whether the State Land Board should act to prospectively appoint members to the Board of Directors of the new Elliott State Research Forest Authority effective on January 1, 2024, with the direction that these individuals fulfill an advisory role to the Department of State Lands on matters pertaining to the forest until the effective date of their appointment and the newly created state agency. The authorities are set out below in that agenda item. I will say that this board is comprised of 7 to 9 members. Currently, we have before you all 9 members that have been nominated according to the process set out in Senate Bill 1546. Following the direction of the bill, Department of State Lands, Oregon State University, and the Elliott Advisory Committee developed a list of candidates for consideration by the Land Board. The combined list of 26 people is Appendix B to this agenda item. We then work together collaboratively, as we have for the last nearly 4 years, to arrive at a proposed slate of candidates that balance different perspectives while providing the continuity of staggered terms anticipated by the legislation for this very first inaugural board of directors. That consensus slate of candidates for your consideration is in Appendix A, along with their short biographies that should be helpful to those who don't yet know these fine individuals. As the staff report indicates, Senate Bill 1546 does not designate interests to be represented on the authority board. It simply directs the Land Board to, quote, endeavor to appoint members who have a full complement of relevant expertise or experience in subjects related to the mission and management policies and operations of the forest, and demonstrated interest in the success of the mission and management policies of the forest, end quote. I think that's very important, the success of the mission and management policies. I believe this slate of proposed candidates more than meet these criteria. The Land Board must approve appointments to this first board of directors and all future nominations. As the agenda item indicates, these appointments are prospective and they will not have any decision-making authority until the effective date of the Senate Bill 1546 on January 1, 2024. Until that time, however, the individuals you appoint today will serve as incredibly talented informal advisors to the department and the Land Board as remaining work is undertaken over the next several months. I would be happy to answer any questions before I make the final recommendation.
All right, questions, Treasurer Reed.
I'm sure. Thank you. One quick question, Director Walker. Significant, I think, that the terms are staggered. So I wonder if you could just give us a sense of how you plan to think about those as those shorter terms come up, how you can continue to add the diversity. We heard some of those concerns through the public comment, and what your thoughts are on that, please.
Well, thank you for that. And I believe that's something that the newly appointed members need to pay attention to. And it is also the Land Board that will be appointing those members. I think there is strong support for increased diversity on the board. We had a great show of diversity on the advisory committee, but not all those members went forward. So I think what we have now is actually pretty darn good. But I do agree with you that we need to think more about that in the future.
Secretary Fagan. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Treasurer Reed. I have a comment on a similar vein. Obviously, I want to thank the Oregonians who are willing to serve, as the governor mentioned. These are heavy roles and big roles and require a lot of time, and their experience and expertise are critical to getting this off the ground. And I will be supporting the slate. And I do want to strongly encourage us to improve racial and tribal diversity on the board. It's critical that as positions become available, that we do prioritize this diversity on the board to making sure that we have a truly representative group of Oregonians and folks that are impacted by the management of this public asset. So I want to make sure that is a priority going forward. And I do want to note that as the chair of the Sustainability Board and another hat that I wear, I do appreciate DSL's emphasis on their diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in your strategic plan, and just encourage us to prioritize these values as we move forward on the project. All right. Any other questions or comments?
Well, those are great observations. I really appreciate it. We're excited to have two representatives from tribes that are willing to continue serving on the advisory committee and the new board, the new provisional board. So we will look forward to increasing that diversity in the future. So if you're ready for the recommendation, Governor, I'll move on that.
I am ready. The chair would also concur in that move towards diversifying the board members as well. Obviously, I do think having the legislature move forward on, I'll just say, per diem opportunities for Oregonians who volunteer for boards and commissions, I think is also helpful for diversifying boards and commissions. And I won't go into the other fight I have with the legislature about task forces, boards and commissions, but in any event, I do think providing funding opportunities will help in that mission.
Thank you, Governor. And we have respected all of our volunteer board members, and they have received per diem when they come to meetings. As you know, for the last 2 years, we've been in a pandemic and no one's traveled too much, but we do respect that. Excuse me. So I will make the department's recommendation at this time. The department recommends the land board appoint the following 9 individuals as members of the Elliott State Research Forest Authority Board of Directors for the terms indicated below, and that subject to appropriate background checks, these appointments be effective as of January 1, 2024. Until this effective date, these individuals should be recognized as informal advisors to the department and the land board on issues relating to the ESRF. 1, Paul Beck, 4 years. 2, Rob Salinger, 4 years. 3, Keith Temchuk, 4 years. 4, Melissa Cribbins, 3 years. 5, Mike Kennedy, 3 years. 6, Colin Beck, 2 years. 7, Teresa Bird, 2 years. 8, Dr. Jennifer Allen, 1 year. 9, Dr. Jack Williams, 1 year. These represent the agreed upon slate of candidates for nomination for the board.
Do I have a motion? Secretary Fagan.
So moved, Governor.
Secretary Fagan moves to adopt the staff recommendation. I see a second from Treasurer Reed. Hearing and seeing no objection, the motion is adopted, and congratulations and thank you.
And Governor, before any of the newly appointed members point this out to me, I will point it out to them. Our terms are as slated here in the board recommendation, but they will be serving all of this next year in an informal capacity, so they should probably add that extra year. So I'm just going to point that out.
All right.
All right. Now, Governor, I'm going to step back. I believe you are taking over item 6.
Yes, but before we do that, I just want to do one more thank you one more time. I do want to say to our DSL team that we as public officials are only as good as our staff, and the DSL team has truly done extraordinary work. Director Walker, under your leadership, I want to say thank you to all of them. Malia, Jeff, Bill Ryan, Allie, Aaron, and Matt DeVore. Please, let's give them a round of applause. OSU, don't worry, I won't forget the Beavers, even though I'm not dressed in Beaver colors today. Dean DeLuca, I know your work has only just begun. Isn't there a Karen Carpenter song? You guys don't even know who Karen Carpenter is. You do? This is good. Oh, good. Okay. All right. Dean, we just really appreciate your leadership. I know that the OSU School of Forestry will make us all proud. I believe that you are ranked #1 in the nation. I think #2 in the world. I'm hoping that the Elliott State Forest Research Forest will bring us to #1, and appreciate your efforts. And Shannon, you as well. Thank you. Extraordinary presentation today. And I know you have other folks working with you, but I just want to say thank you to the OSU team. Go Beavers. Thank you. Peter Harkema, thank you. No awards for you, just praise. You were instrumental in our private forest accords. Thank you. You stepped up when we needed you. Thank you. I know you've got your fingers in other pies as well. Just really appreciate your steadfast involvement, your incredible facilitation skills, and your extensive knowledge of our forestry industry and the critters and the salamanders, of course, now that I am Governor Salamander. Just really appreciate your extraordinary efforts. Thank you, Peter. Let's see, we have the committee members again. For all of you that are here, please stand up. I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for your dedication and determination for making Oregon a better place for everyone. And to those of you, I love the acronyms. Good job, DSL, on the acronyms. Congress came up with the acronym of BILL, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which I thought was a travesty when they had so many other opportunities. To our Elliott State Research Forest, which is now the ESRF Advisory Board of Directors. I think I got all the letters in there. I'll let somebody figure out the acronym ESRF BOD. Thank you all very much for your willingness to continue to serve. Thank you. And looks like we've got, I think, other DSL staff here.
Oh, yes, we do. And Miss Lucy, would you raise your hand, please? Lucy is the daughter of the
yes,
105 on Christmas Day. Thank you for signing a card.
Thank you for your hard work, and may you live as long as your mom. May we all live as long as your mom. Anybody else you want to name?
We have Sue, and I can't see under the mask. April and Jennifer and come on, Rich and Rick, sorry. He's newer to our staff, and Joseph.
All right. And thank you, Team DSL.
We have new staff, Kate. And you know, Allie, what happened to Katrina? She's busy.
Okay.
She's busy working on a project for all of you. So thank you very much. And I know Malia's over there hiding behind somebody. Malia Masiva.
Okay.
And I think that covers all my staff in there. Oh, no, it isn't. It's Erin and Linda. And Erin is like, she's the land board assistant. So I just want you to be forever grateful that she keeps this thing running. So thank you.
Okay. Great. Okay.
Okay.
And then I have two more. This also would not have happened without the support, hard work, and encouragement of my colleagues on the land board. Secretary Fagan, you're new to this battle, but I want to say thank you to you and your team. Delighted that Molly's been able to join us for these meetings. Just really want to appreciate your hard work and your service to the state of Oregon. Thank you. And Treasurer Reed and team, it's been a long, hard path, and I just really appreciate your efforts. And I'm going to let you thank your team members, but I know Dimitri had his fingers in a lot of pies in this work, and just want to say thank you to all of you for your hard work.
Thank you, Governor. Yes. I would just point with no more words necessary to Dimitri and Ryan and Amy. There are others on our team who are not here in person, but we wouldn't be here without our team as part of the much bigger team. Thank you, Governor.
Yes, let's give them a round of applause. Keep bringing in more money for the state. Thank you very much. And, and then lastly, I do want to say thank you. I've had 2 land board advisors while I've been here. First was Richard Whitman, and Richard has retired and gone off to, I hope, more fun and frivolity that he had in his state service. So I want to give Richard a thank you in absentia. And Jason Minor, thank you very much for keeping me calm, cool, and collected.
And Governor, I do want to make sure we acknowledge Matt DeVore, who has worked steadfastly to make sure that I don't make mistakes and we do everything we're supposed to do according to the law.
So boring. Thank you, Matt. Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 6. And you all can leave if you want, but you're welcome to stay if you would like to. By statute, the state land board shall appoint a director of the Department of State Lands to serve for a term of 4 years. As we all know, Director Walker was appointed in March of 2018 as an interim director, and then in August 13th, 2019, she was appointed as a permanent director, and her permanent appointment was made retroactive to March of 2018, March 1st. She has indicated her interest in being appointed to serve as a second 4-year term as the director of the Oregon Department of State Lands. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move approval of the recommendation as indicated here by the Land Board Assistants that the Land Board appoint Director Walker to a second 4-year term as Director of the Department of State Lands, retroactively effective to March 1st, 2022.
And Governor, I will second that motion with, obviously because of her expertise and also because she introduced my kids to the prehistoric gardens in Port Orford and they're the best. So I second the motion.
All right. I believe it is the unanimous recommendation of our state land board assistants that we appoint Vicki Walker to a 4-year term as the director of the Oregon Department of State Lands, retroactively effective to March 1st, 2022. We have a motion, we have a second, and seeing and hearing no objection, the motion is approved, and congratulations. And now you can come back up.
Thank you, Governor. I appreciate the support. I'm honored by the support. I love working with this team here at DSL. And we have a lot left to do to bring home some of the projects that we have outstanding. I will move on to agenda item 7, which is a brief update of the real estate asset management plan. And then when I've concluded that, we'll go into other, and I have a special presentation under other. So let me get my paperwork here. The Oregon Department of State Lands is updating the asset management plan that guides state stewardship of our school lands. This 10-year plan is the key policy document for managing school lands, providing a framework for day-to-day and long-term decision-making, as well as metrics for evaluating the performance and value of school lands. And I want to really emphasize the metrics component because we can't really do this well without metrics. The plan is currently being updated in a process that includes evaluation of current best practices for managing school lands, market trends, economic forecasts, and extensive public and stakeholder engagement to identify those community needs and new ideas. The metrics will tell us how successful we are at meeting those goals. Updating the plan is a focus project of the department's 2022-23 strategic action plan. And the overall project outcome is to obtain state land board approval of the new plan by December 31 of 2023. We have made progress that you can see in your briefing materials. the spring through fall of 2022, we've been evaluating the past decade and looking at how we might go forward. We developed the project charter and timeline, researching best practices and engaging stakeholders. The project team identified key stakeholders and interests and began that outreach in November of this year, with engagement expected to continue through February of 2023. And I know when I spoke with Treasurer, he wanted to know who our folks were, and I did print that, and I'm trying to quickly find it. I thought I had stuck it in my notebook. We have federal partners, a lot of federal partners. We have state partners. We have county and city partners. We have members of the public. And Vicki, what did you do with it? I am usually so coordinated and ready.
Director Walker, I'm not as concerned about a specific list, but just the general sense of it and what your plans are to engage those folks and how that complies as part of the plan.
Yeah, well, we're reviewing public comments that we received during land sales that we had. We had some pretty major land sales in 2022. And we also are reviewing comments that received during the 2022-26 strategic plan outreach that we did. And the 2022 DSL customer satisfaction survey. So we've had a number of takeaways from stakeholder input to date and review of recent comments, things that desire for ongoing engagement throughout the plan development process. This is what people expect of their state agencies, that we are transparent and open and interested in hearing their feedback, interest in increasing revenue to the Common School Fund, and the continued contribution of school lands to a diverse, balanced Common School Fund portfolio. Management of those school lands needs to consider regional and local issues that Oregon is facing. So we're hearing from local land use folks who are concerned about what we're doing. We're hearing from recreation folks and support for renewable energy projects. This has been a goal of mine since I came on board, and we're really going forward with it in this management plan. We believe that we can emphasize solar, wind, geothermal, and even possibly some hydroelectric projects that may help us get to address issues of climate change. Now, I passed a bill in the legislature. Now I can't remember the name of it, the title of it. I should have, but there is a element in the Oregon Constitution that allows us to do bonding for hydroelectric projects. We don't do much of that anymore, but the state has the ability to do that. We also want to support partnerships and explore opportunities in conservation, community partnerships, and partnerships with other public and private land managers. So those are also the folks that are included in our list of stakeholders, and certainly support for recreational access. So these are the things we're doing. We have information on our website, and I think it's been pretty robust. And there is my stakeholder list right there under Exhibit A in my notebook. So we've also had, I wanted to emphasize that we also have regional housing authorities that have been involved in our outreach. As you know, you all helped us pass a bill. You didn't specifically get in there and do it, but I think your conversation with legislators when we passed Stevens Road legislation, that some of that would be set aside for school district housing. It's the first such program in the state. I'm very proud that this land board supported that program, and that will get underway as the Stevens Road property is developed. And I'd like to see more opportunities for that. So I'm excited about it.
A comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I was a little afraid when you were pausing about your bill, you were going to ask if I voted for it. I don't remember. But I was glad to hear the emphasis on renewable energy. I think that's important. And I just encourage you to keep looking for people who haven't previously been part of the stakeholders, the folks who, I don't think we should depend on people to necessarily identify themselves, thinking of local school boards and parents and others who we should be reaching out to proactively as well.
And I agree with you, Treasurer Reed, and I think looking at diverse communities too that don't normally step out and
Right.
get involved. And I think that was your point.
Yes.
And it's well taken. So thank you. Okay, that brings us to the last item on the agenda. This is, of course, Governor, is your last meeting as State Land Board Chair. And the department and your fellow land board members absolutely had to recognize you. And I'm so glad you didn't go on another trip somewhere so that we couldn't recognize you. I was a little bit nervous and worried about that because I know you're trying to squeeze a lot of things in.
I have to tell you, I was invited to the White House to do a bill signing for the Marriage Equality Act. And I have been traveling so much, I could not get on another airplane, but I didn't want to miss this particular land board meeting. So I chose wisely.
Yes, thank you, Governor. We appreciate it because we want to recognize your stewardship of the Common School Fund, school lands, and our waters and wetlands. And moments like these call for a podium, Governor. So if you and Jason would please stand while Aaron comes in, swoops in, and puts the podium back up on the table. It is Shamia first. And then you'll be turning it over to the treasurer. So at this time, thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Governor. We'll begin our special presentation. Secretary Fagan will kick off this very historic, momentous event. Madam Secretary, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Director Walker, and thank you to those who stayed. Governor, it has been such an honor to serve. Man, I'm not going to get through this without crying. It has been such an honor to work with you during my decade in public service. Your service to Oregon has been unprecedented in so many ways. You served as governor during a once in a century deadly pandemic with only bad, worse, and worst options. But you consistently chose the options that, while often unpopular, saved lives. You not metaphorically saved lives. You saved actual lives. There are literally thousands of Oregonians living and breathing today, preparing for the holidays with their families right now, because your decisive action prevented them from dying in the past 2.5 years. Over your many years of service, you've helped Oregon take numerous unprecedented steps, from increasing access to the ballot to the Elliott State Research Forest, and historic investments in addressing climate change, education, reproductive freedom, transportation, and affordable housing. During your time in office, the Oregon Health Plan has covered 94% of adults and every single child in Oregon, every Oregon child. On a personal note, I deeply value the mentorship and guidance you provided me over the years. So thank you for your mentorship, your friendship, your always fierce fashion, and the way that you always make my kids feel so special when they see you. So that's why today I'm excited to announce, as Secretary of State, that I'm dedicating the 2022 or the 2023 Oregon Blue Book to the 30-year legacy of Oregon Governor Kate Brown. Come on, Governor. In gratitude for over 3 decades of service to the people of Oregon, we've created this award for you featuring the Blue Book covers from your first year as a legislator, your first year as Secretary of State, and your last year as governor, as well as the dedication that will appear in the 2023-2024 Oregon Blue Book. Gov, it has truly been an honor to serve with you, and Oregon is better because you have served her.
Oh, no. Okay, all right.
That is a tough act to follow. And I don't think I have a whole ton to add to that, but I do want to add something that's a little bit different because of the range of things that we've had the good fortune to work on. It's probably no surprise that in my mind, one thing that stands apart is the Elliott. So much has already been said, so it doesn't bear repeating here. But I do think it's worth thinking about the range of things that have changed while you've been governor in the context of the land board. It's already been it's been talked about always bringing in more money. The common school fund is double what it was when you started. So that's something to keep in mind. As we thought about what we might be able to offer, I thought about what things are out there, and I feel a little bad adding another thing that you're gonna have to find wall space for, because the last thing any elected official needs is another thing to hang on a wall. But there is one thing that we have at Treasury that others don't, which is the ability to sell bonds. So we thought we would put the cover sheet from the certificates of participation that started this process for the Elliott, along with a photo of what we're actually preserving. So I wrote on it, the money's in the bank.
The money's in the bank. I love it. The legislature thought we were crazy.
All right. Thank you, Treasurer Reed and Secretary Fagan and Governor, from your first meeting in February of 2009 to today. Oh my God. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, you're getting one, right? Oregon has benefited tremendously from your service on the state land board. I have known and served with you for many years now, long before the land board, and I hope our friendship continues into your next venture, whatever that might be. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate your commitment and your dedication. All of us who serve in public service truly care about Oregonians, and you have risen to the top of that. And I'm just so grateful. As you see, my DSL staff, who's in the office today, have come to join us for a final thank you and present you with an enduring reminder of the South Slough. This piece of art is an encaustic painting by Oregon artist and beekeeper George Hansen, who is the father-in-law to our fabulous communications director. And he makes these with beeswax. Oh, wow. And this is the South Slough National Research Estuarine Research Reserve, which you have visited, and you have been also extended a lifetime opportunity to come and canoe and kayak and do whatever it is that you wish. So we wish you well, Governor. We have a picture of you with your land board members as well. Oh my God. Yes. More wall space. And all of the land board members will receive this as well as your parting gift. You'll also receive another wall art, which is a yeah, a copy of the poem Gratitude by our poet laureate today, and that we're going to be getting original signatures from all three of you so that you all three have that. Governor, I'm not going to cry because I told myself I'd never do that. But I just have to tell you, this has been a tremendous honor to serve. And so thank you, staff, for showing up.
Why don't you come on up and we'll
And-
take a photo? Absolutely gorgeous. And you know, I got money for ESL for research at OSU. I don't know if you did that.
I did not.
Oh, there's Ben. Oh, you guys. Oh,
Oh, yeah.
wow.
We found all these. Thank you, Ally. And so this is just running in the background.
That-
There we
that
are,
was
the
familiar.
Elliott.
Oh, wow. Yeah, now I need the 10,000 square foot house. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. man.
Oh, I miss them a lot.
That's, oh my God. Oh, yeah. Jim Paul? Wow.
Who's going off into retirement?
Oh, he is.
He's taking, retiring and, yeah.
Stand out in the crowd, don't you? Yeah. Come on. See it, tell folks, everybody come on out. Take it back. Yeah, that was Treasurer Reed.
Everybody.
Sorry.
Thanks. No, no. Yeah. I got blue. There's blue. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, we better. Well, I'm gonna go ahead. Where's my thing? That should have concluded our December 13th, 2022 State Land Board meeting. Thank you all. We should have probably concluded it for that. Yeah.